I have a gripe with the reaction to the shooting in Atlanta, Georgia, where 8 people were killed. It's not about the motivation of the shooter. It's not about the overall narrative surrounding the shooting. And it's sure as hell not a defense of that bastard Donald Trump who stirred this shit up in the first place. But goddamn, our reaction to this story is even less competent than usual. Alright, so before I give my hot take, what happened in Georgia? Well, the official story is pretty simple. Some sick fuck had a sexual addiction, but his religious fundamentalist roots told him that that was evil, so he decided to correct for that. So he drove up to a gun store in Canton, Georgia, passed a background check that took all of 2 minutes, and here we are. In his quest to cure the world of sexual urges, he assaulted 3 spas, killing 8 people, 7 of them women, 6 of those women were Asian. Now, the narratives here are running wild with everybody pointing the finger at everybody and conservatives pretending there's no problem here at all. Usually I don't like focusing on singular cases like these because obviously you can't tell anything about an overlying trend with a single case. I think it's safe to say that Christianity's gender roles and sex negativity played a factor, but regarding narratives, 2 things. 1, feminists are talking about how this case is a sign of systemic misogyny. I made a video last week detailing why I think Not All Men is a valid response to sexual violence critiques. You can find the link to that in the top right corner of this video, but the short version of my defense of Not All Men is slogans like teach men not to rape and hold men responsible are kind of like the feminist version of the conservatives' 1350, where instead of looking for the causes of these forms of systemic violence, people pin blame on the demographic itself, socially ostracizing them and causing them to commit the same crimes we were trying to prevent. Of course, there's the Republican side, which is far worse. The shooter blamed sex addiction, denying that race played any part of his shooting.
If you blame this on racism, which as the cop says it does not appear to be,
which they use to turn around and pretend anti-Asian violence isn't a problem these days,
you're not going to figure anything out. You're just going to propel a leftist fantasy.
Anti-Asian hate crimes are drastically up from previous years, despite us being in lockdown. Regardless of whether the Atlanta shooter himself is racist, the fact anti-Asian hate crimes are up is indisputable, but Republicans will dispute it anyway. Why? Because if they don't, then they have to investigate why anti-Asian hate crime is up. I wonder who that could be.
Wuhan, Kung flu, yes. Some people call it the Chinese flu, the China flu. Right? They call it the China as opposed to the China.
Ah yes, I'm sure you're using the word China virus purely descriptively. Loud cheering for neutral terminology happens all the time. Now, let's talk about the activism and what my problem with it is. We're seeing a bunch of social media posts about this issue, and it's worthwhile to go over what they're saying. On the somewhat productive side, they're debunking stereotypes, like all Asians being super rich, or that Asians are all hardworking NPCs with no personality. Trust me, Asians are just as lazy and useless as the rest of you. In fact, most of the wealthy Asians have come relatively recently as a result of selective immigration policy. The poor Asian families living here all this time have stayed poor, but conservatives will conflate these 2 groups together, ignoring the fact that Asian immigrants are rich because of racist immigration policy in order to pretend capitalism works and that you can somehow fulfill the American dream, and that, of course, implicitly, black people are just stupid or not hardworking. Another stereotype is the demure, submissive Asian woman, unspoiled by the feminist agenda. I think the feminization of Asians is even harder on men. Women taking proactive and masculine roles has become more socially accepted, but there's nothing society values less than a feminine man. Now, time for my hot take on Asian activism. It's not really all that helpful. I mean, sure, debunking racist stereotypes is nice, but look at all the rest of those posts. You know, the ones that say, Asians are not a virus, or racism is bad, or we're Americans too, or we will not be silenced. Like, I'm not sure those will have much effect on people who aren't already sympathetic to our cause. Look, it's great that people are mobilized to march and protest in the streets, but what exactly is our goal? It just feels like we're raising awareness for awareness's sake. which the American people are already aware. The point of a protest isn't simply to exist. It's supposed to keep the spotlight on a certain issue so that policy will be shaped around it. Black Lives Matter aimed for police reform. The Women's March aimed for bodily autonomy and consent. Now, which policy goal is going to be the main thrust of the Asian American movement? The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is an opposition to affirmative action. But Democrats, being the id-Paul race baiters that they are, aren't going to help with that, and the Republicans are straight up white supremacist. I'm sorry, but without a goal, this movement is literally pointless. It's just a fad, people jumping on a bandwagon that'll fizzle out soon enough. Look, I want this movement to succeed. There's ways to spin this movement to be in favor of, say, gun control, or immigration reform, or freeing Hong Kong or Taiwan. But I see none of that happening so far. Look, maybe this is just a hot take. People are angry right now, we're going to let things sink in before we start proposing policy solutions. But the most successful civil rights movements strike while the iron is hot. We've got to find out where we're going, and fast.
I'm and I approve this message.